Hello, everyone. This is MMA Interesting Prospects podcast. Today, our guest is Adam Posener, one of the best Canadian welterweight prospects. Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm not too bad, man. How are you?
I'm good. Uh, Adam, you in your last fight actually dominated your opponent. It was some kind of veteran of the game, and the performance was like super impressive. So, if you can tell me if you could anything better in this fight.
Like things that I could have done like differently that would have been better, or
Yes, yes. If you could change anything, would you be able to do anything better?
yeah, there was a couple things that I saw in that fight. Like for example, early on, I guess in both rounds, I actually cracked the guy pretty good. Um, I cracked him with some good shots, and obviously, I mean, I think I could have put him away with strikes, but either way, we got the job done, and the finish was there either way. So. I'm not too really picky about it, but if I had to say something that would have been different, I think definitely seeing that he was hurt would have definitely been a little bit better.
And he actually is quite good grappler. I believe that he's a BJJ black belt, and you dominated him and submit him. So I believe that also for your confidence is a big thing.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It just shows that my ground game's on that level, and in my opinion, I've only really scratched the surface of my skills and my knowledge. And again, with two fights and the experience that I have, it's not really something for me to show a lot of because I've only had two fights. So again, you can't learn everything in two fights. So again, it's going to be more and more scratching the surface and just showing more potential as we go on.
And do you have any fighter in mind and a name that you would like to face right now?
For my next fight,
Yes.
yes. Not overly. I mean, I'm just hoping for a guy similar experience to me. Definitely a test because especially after when I fought the last opponent, David Briones, who was the black belt, and he had 8 professional fights going into that fight. That was fight number 9 for him, and that was only my second. So, to take a guy like that out and do that to him, honestly, I'm just happy with whoever. I mean, I'm trying to get on BFL 81 September 6th. It's hard to find opponents after that performance, but honestly, whoever. I'm not too picky with it. Just take whoever, see who gets offered, and then we go from there.
And actually, the BFL is a very big organization, a very big promotion in Canada, and you were a former amateur champion there, and
Yep,
right now you are 2-0. So I think that it's BFL can give you some additional exposure to your name.
totally. Yeah, BFL is definitely one of the bigger promotions. It's definitely, especially like on the western side of Canada. Obviously, Canadian MMA as a whole is rising up. You're seeing a bunch of Canadians on the Contender Series this year. The guy, people like Michael Imperato, Pat Pitlick, Shannon Clark. List goes on. Even on the Ultimate Fighter, there's a couple guys. There's I know he's not Canadian, but he was from Unified. Mark Hume, the guy who trains with Jerkis Duplessis in South Africa. There's Tom Theocharis on Ultimate Fighter as well. So Canadian MMA is growing at a really rapid rate. And for as for BFL, yeah, it's definitely one of the big platforms, especially on the western side of Canada. And BFL sent lots of guys to the UFC. Like recently, there's been Kyle Machado made it recently. Siri City made it recently. Though he is from Ontario, but still he had a lot of fights in Battlefield. And I think the BFL fights were what got him to the show. Vogel had a super close fight, Mateo Vogel. And the list can just keep going for, a pretty good amount of time. And even currently there's a couple guys that are on the verge of making Contender Series. And eventually I want to put my name in that discussion sometime in the future.
What I really like about your, let's say, fight, it was before fight, it was your entrance, because it when I hear the song, it's always remind me of Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, right above it. Yeah. No, I like the song. I mean, I remember I first got into MMA, first watching MMA. It was actually a Daniel Cormier fight against Patrick Cummins. I remember the iconic moment where he picked him up with the high crotch and then spun him in the air and slammed him. I just remember every time Daniel Cormier walked out, I'm like, oh, it's this song again, it's this song again, and I couldn't figure out what it was, so I'm trying to search it up, and I eventually found right above it, and then I rocked with it for quite a couple of fights.
It is a great song, and he always is running. He was running to the cage, so it was
Yeah, he
also
didn't
like
run.
the.
I do a bit of a walk. A run's not really my thing, but yeah, no, definitely the DC walk is iconic.
And if we can talk a little bit about your like beginnings in the sport and MMA and overall combat sport, was it the MMA the first sport that you ever train as far as the combat sport, or do you have any like additional background from the other sport?
Yeah. So I started in MMA. I mostly did jiu-jitsu a lot starting out. Like I put together a bunch of jiu-jitsu tournaments because when I was, younger, I've done this for a long time, right? So when I started out doing this, I wanted to get competing. And there's three really options. There's like kickboxing tournaments, wrestling competitions, and then jiu-jitsu. And then I just felt jiu-jitsu was the right way to go. It's easy to do a lot of them, and it's not like overly hard on your body like wrestling is, for example. So then yeah, I did jiu-jitsu for about like I competed in jiu-jitsu for about like 4 years, like really focusing on jiu-jitsu. And then honestly, I thought there's a point where I could maybe, really take this somewhere, like, go to like IBJJF or ADCC, for example. But I wanted to eventually make the switch to MMA because that was always my ultimate goal since I was like 11 years old, right? So eventually then I made the switch to MMA, and like there before, now it's different with the athletic commission and stuff, but then there's like these pancreation tournaments, which is like modified MMA. It's kind of like, headgear, shin guards, and obviously, the MMA gloves and whatnot. And it's just like a 1 round, 3 minute kind of deal, which is a good way to get a feel of what MMA is like. But it's modified because you're obviously wearing sparring gear. And then a little bit more down the line, COVID happened, so I had a bit of a layoff there. And then literally like 2 months after I graduated high school, I booked my first fight, my first amateur fight. And then that was October 2022. And then ever since then, just kept fighting. And yeah, now here we are, year and a half later.
And you are, of course, a very, very good grappler in all of your fights. You seems to be right now quite unstoppable. And what belt are you in BJJ?
Yeah, I've got a purple belt under Matt Kwan in jiu-jitsu. And even again, like I've talked about it a little bit earlier, even with my good grappling game, I feel like it's largely because I've just my fights have all mostly ended in submissions. So I have a lot of skills that haven't really been released yet, nor have they really had to because of the jiu-jitsu skill difference.
But of course, with BFL, you like level of your opponents will grow, so you can in
Yeah,
your next fights show a little bit more from the other
exactly.
areas of your game.
Yeah, 100%. The BFL really gives you really will build you up the right way, and they'll really make fair matchups or the matchups that are right. Because again, I'm only 19 years old. I'm not like I need to, go to the top right away, right? But again, at the same time, you have to find a happy medium because you need to take the right fights, right? You can't just be fighting guys lower level forever. You need to eventually be building up, and that was the difference of fighting the first guy I fought, who was an undefeated amateur. He was young as well. He was making his pro debut, so he was basically me. And then the fight after, I fought David Briones, who was, jiu-jitsu black belt, 8 fights. He gave Naveed Zingane a really hard fight, and his stock definitely went up after that fight. So when he came into the fight with me, there was a lot more, well, this guy did this to Naveed, did this to Naveed, but then we saw the skill difference in there.
And right now, what is the main gym that you are right now training in?
What was it? Main theme?
Main gym.
Oh, gym. Yeah. I train at a couple different gyms. There's Posener's MMA, there's On Guard Jiu Jitsu, Universal MMA. I also train at Animal Boxing and MMA, and yeah, between those four, that's mostly where I'm at right now.
And do you have in any of these gyms the guys like you, the young up and coming prospects that in few years can be like big stars either on the Canadian scene or even in the world scene?
There's not too many younger guys that I'm really with. Obviously, like You know, you watch anyone in BFL that's from Vancouver area, I've probably trained with them currently, or I've trained with them in the past. So again, it's just the overall level of, you know, Western Canada MMA, especially particularly in the Lower Mainland BC area. Overall, the level is very high here, I believe, and that's why I think BFL is really sending more guys to the big stage.
And of course, in your fights, you are like for now like primarily a grappler. But
Yeah.
is it like BJJ the favorite part right now of your training in training camp?
Yeah, I mean, definitely focusing on jiu-jitsu, especially earlier on. Obviously, like the more I've gone on in MMA, I've focused a lot more on just rounding out the skill set and trying to make everything equal rather than trying to have big skill differences. Trying to bring everything up together, because as a true mixed martial artist, that's what the ultimate goal is to be as balanced as possible. And that's my ultimate goal with this, is to be as equally level in everything and bring everything up together to make it to the top.
And when you are in the training camp, and of course the sometimes there are the days that it's like that you are tired, that maybe
Yeah.
you really don't want to train. How do you deal with this kind of days?
Yeah, it's just like I always just treat those kind of days like you just need to get them through, right? You need to just get through the days, because again, then it'll, you know, motivate you to be like, hey, make sure that your recovery is on point before the fight, so then you don't feel like this in the octagon. Because again, if you know you have a bad day in the gym, it's gonna happen, right? You're in the gym a lot, right? As long as the off day is not in the octagon, that's the main thing.
Yes, that's right. This is like the worst thing that can happen. That you
Yeah,
training
no, that's
is
the worst
great and
feeling for sure. Yeah, because like even like I'll even bring up a story like my for my pro debut, they made me walk out twice, believe it or not. I don't know if you saw BFL 79 or not. I walked out the for the there's a fight before me, and then they made me walk out during that, so then I had to go back, and then the fight after I walked out again. So definitely that was an interesting experience of you know, not being thrown off and still getting the job done.
yes, definitely. It can like mess a little bit with your head.
100%. Yeah, it can, because you know, it definitely could have that time for me, but you know, I've done this for a long time. I've competed for a long time. Variables happen. It was a mistake on the director's part, and again, we're all human beings. It's a part of life. It's the way it goes. So I'm not too wasn't too worried about it. Didn't really take it too seriously.
And when you are outside of your training camp, do you like train every day, or you prefer to go to the gym like once or twice in the week?
Yeah. Like for example, like you know, you finish a fight, you take your time off to get to more of like a mental break, and really the training is still roughly the same, but it's more so just about getting better, right? Trying to think of even one skill in every aspect of fighting that you want to work on, right? Maybe you have a stand-up technique you want to work on. Maybe you have a takedown you want to do, or a submission move you want to do, or something like that, right? You keep it around like 3 to 5 things that you want to improve on, and you know, you're in between camp phase. So then when training camp starts, now you're a little bit better than you were in going into your last fight.
This is probably also the very good thing, because sometimes the fighters outside of the training camp, they are really not going to the gym, and they have like weight issues after this. So
Yeah.
probably is better to have the continuity of the training overall.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like you just want something for sure, right? It's not like you're not going 5 hard rounds every day like you are in a training camp, right? You're doing more of like, you know, hey, let's get better at this, and you know, try and work on it over time. Even in a training camp, in my opinion, it's mostly like that. The only difference is the training matters a little bit more in that 8 week phase. Um, Really, it's just like, you know, how are things going in the training camp, right? How are your sparring rounds going? How are the jiu-jitsu rounds going? How are the stand-up rounds going, et cetera, et cetera. So they matters a little bit more. But when you're out of training camp, it can be much more relaxed, It's more just about getting better, layering on new skills, and really just improving every single fight. And I feel like so far I've done that.
In UFC, we have one very young fighter, is Raul Rosas from bantamweight
Yeah.
division. I believe that when he was signed, he was 17, something around this. And in the theory, if the UFC would contact you right now, when you are almost 20, would you be
Yeah.
interested in taking the contract right now?
I wouldn't. I mean, I would like a couple more fights, but again, it is a very good opportunity. It's the chance to make it, right? It's what we've worked for. Um, I wouldn't mind a couple more fights first, if I'm being honest, right? Maybe get me to like, get me 5, 6 fights, and then maybe we can consider it. But I think at 2 fights at this stage of my career, it's a little bit tricky because in well, I guess BC for this case, you have to be 19 to fight at all in BC. But in Mexico, Raul's been fighting since he's been professional since he's like 16. And I had my first amateur fight. I had to travel for my whole amateur career essentially. I had my first amateur fight at 17, and then I had like a couple fights at 18, and then I fought for the BFL amateur title at 19 because turning to BFL and having that amateur fight before I turned professional, having a little bit of like a story and a name before you do it was quite valuable to them. So yeah, I mean, as for going to the UFC, I wouldn't mind a shot, but at the same time, the time will be right, and I'll know when I'm ready for it, and then I'll get my chance.
Actually, I was quite surprised when they signed such a young fighter, because usually it's even the fighters who are like 21 or 22, they are
Yeah,
super young. So it was
yeah,
like a very unusual case.
yeah. No, it's something that I don't think we're gonna see very often, honestly. Um, but again, it's like talk about in Mexico. I think he was like, what was he, 7-0 when he got signed or something like that, 7, 8-0. Because in Mexico they fight right away, right? He didn't really have an amateur career, so he just turned professional right away at 17, 16, whatever he was. Kind of similar to like Rory McDonald, for example. Look what the career he had, right? So yeah, Raul definitely has some potential, and if he just keeps doing his thing the way he's doing it, I think things could possibly go very well for him.
You mentioned Rory McDonald, and this will be my next question. Who, in your
Yeah.
opinion, is the best Canadian fighter, but of course not name GSP?
Yeah, yeah, not named GSP though, because I feel like GSP is obviously, I think, the obvious
Yes.
one. He was a 9-time champion. Yeah, as for overall Canadian fighter, I would have to go with Rory McDonald because I think he was, obviously I think that's someone that I've looked up to for quite a while because he started fighting at 16, I started fighting at 17, and you look at our similar career starts, right? His first 4 or 5 professional fights were all submissions, right? And it looks like mine might possibly be the same thing. And look at the career he had. He was number 2 in the world. He almost beat Robbie Lawler for the title if he had like an extra 10 seconds, like that third round. He had him hurt really badly. But yeah, I'd say Rory McDonald is probably the greatest currently out of Canada. But again, there's lots of Canadian fighters that are on the way up. You got Mike Malott at 170 as well, who's on his way up. He was very close to beating Neil Magny, who's a ranked opponent, and he's on the Colorado card. I think it's July 13th or something like that. I think he's really going to remind everybody that he's that level.
And even outside of the UFC, the like level of, in my opinion, level of like Canadian prospects right now is
Yep.
super high level, because BFL,
Yeah.
because Unified MMA, there are a few
Yeah.
very like big organization, and I believe
Yeah.
that in like 2 or 3 years, that the guys who are not in the UFC right now, they can be even in the rankings in the UFC.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Like you nailed it spot on the head. BFL and Unified have lots of top guys. Like I'd say, like BFL. I think the winner there. I think Rodrigo Cezinando is up there. Naveed Zingane is up there. There's Ali Wasuk up there. There's 3 guys right off the top of my head. Obviously there's a bunch more, but And for unified, same kind of deal. There's Zach Powell, I know, is a good one. I think he's probably going to be the next guy out of unified to make it after, Pat Pitalik, Shannon Clark, etc. But again, in a couple of years, these guys could be in the rankings very possibly.
And when you are thinking about your career, what would be the best moment to go to the UFC in like 3 years, in 5 years, in like a perfect scenario when you are thinking
Yeah.
about perfect world?
Yeah, we have to see how these fights go, right? We have to see who I fight in my next fight. Am I going to be fighting for the title or not in BFL? Because I feel like that's the big thing. Everyone from BFL that's made it to Contender Series has had the BFL title and defended it a couple times. So we'll really have to see who I fight and how the division is at that time, and really who there is in Canada or North America. Because if I can get the right matchups, and it could be very fast, but it also could take a while because it's up to the boss Dana White at the end of the day.
And about the BFL, it would be, I think, that a really cool story because you would be a amateur champion, then
Yeah,
being undefeated as the pro, all fights in BFL, being the welterweight champion there. So I think that
yeah,
the whole story would be great.
yeah. It'd be a complete story, really. It's literally 2 weeks after I turned 19, I win the amateur belt, and then about like a year and a bit later, potentially a year and a half later, I could get the regional world title, defend that thing a couple times, and then go to the Contender Series, and then hopefully have the same or similar career that Rory did, being top in the world, etc., and just going from there. But again, we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. You got to do this one thing at a time. I got to get an opponent for September 6th, and we'll take it from there.
And do you think that you will go up to the middleweight division in next few years?
Um, that's a good question. I've never really thought about it yet. I feel like 170 is a very good division for me. I just think like with how my physical stats are, like my height, reach, etc. Um, so yeah, I think 170 is the division for me right now. Middleweight could be possible if like maybe obviously if I can't make 170 anymore for whatever reason. Um, we'll see how it goes. I'm not too picky. That again, I just need to get fights at this stage of my career. I'm not overly think about that kind of thing yet.
And you said that you would like to face to fight in another up and coming next BFL show. And after this,
Yeah.
would you like to take another fight if it would be possible? So you would have 4 fights this year.
Yeah, it would be 4 fights this year because I fought on 79, BFL 79 in February, and then I got beat David Briones in May. September 6th, I'm hoping for an opponent, keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully, Jay Golshani finds a guy for me or convinces a guy to say yes. And then possibly if there's a December show. But yeah, 3, 4 fights this year, I consider it a good year either way.
I think for your next opponent, you can be like interesting challenge because overall you are very talented and you are a
Thank
prospect,
you.
and you but you are undefeated. So from like opponent's perspective, it can be interesting because they can beat you, they can take this all. So the
Yeah.
next fight actually can be really like entertaining.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big fight for sure. A lot of even guys who I thought were going to say yes. I'm not going to name names because again, not going to really call anyone out overly. But basically, yeah, we've got a lot of guys who honestly it would be very exciting fights. They turned it down unfortunately. So, hopefully again, someone, hopefully someone finds an opponent. Hopefully Jay finds an opponent. Maybe by the time this is up, I may have someone, but current day, I don't have an opponent. But maybe when this episode is up, then maybe I'll have someone. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I think Jay's got it.
And overall, are you a MMA fan as the there is a Saturday night and you like to watch UFC fights?
Oh yeah, totally. I love watching any as much MMA as possible, just because again, you can see the different levels. Like, for example, you can see like, oh, contender series guy gets signed, and then you see who is he gonna fight? How is that overall skill level at that entry level UFC? And then you get guys with like maybe 5 UFC fights, and you see the improvements there, and then the on the verge of the rankings kind of guys, and then top 15, top 10, top 5, etc. Right? So it's not, it's not like it's not really that okay. I think it's a big deal for me, but at the same time, it can you know be a lot to keep up with sometimes. So, but whenever I can watch it, I will.
So what do you think about Alex Pereira? Because everybody is like talking about him right now.
Yeah, Alex Pereira. Yeah, Alex Pereira's got some crazy power. I don't know how he does some of the things he does. It's one of those things that's very untraditional. I feel like it's one of those things that's like it's only for him, right? The way he kicks, the way he moves, the way he punches, the way he sets things up. It's very not necessarily, you can't really say it's odd because it works at the highest level, but it's unique in its own way. And that's the kind of beauty with martial arts is you can find your own ways to make things work.
But what he did in like less than 3 years, it's like probably will not happen in like 10 or 20 years because he is
Yeah, that's
the
that's
double
that's crazy
champion.
what he's done. Yeah, it's crazy is what he's done. It's he had like 8 fights in the UFC. Basically, like his first couple fights, right? He fought like that guy from Greece. He fought Bruno Silva, and then after that, it was former champions, right? It was Sean Strickland, current former champion. Israel Adesanya, he was the current champ at the time, but former champion now. And then he fought Jan Blachowicz, former champion, right? Yuri Prochazka, former champion, beat him twice. Jamal Hill, former champion. So we'll see what happens with him next. He could possibly go up to heavyweight and fight John Jones or Tom Aspinall, but the last real fight at light heavyweight for him is Magomed and Goliath.
Yes, but actually he can fight anyone, and like all of defense will be interesting. What's he gonna do next? Because he is making a history.
Yeah, he is. He's making history in his own right. He's definitely breaking the greatest of all time lists, in my opinion. With the fast rise, and especially since he's like what 37. Like, yeah, he's 37, right? So like, to do what he was doing, he got signed at like 35, and to be a 2-weight world champion, defend both of his. Or no, sorry, he didn't defend his middleweight title, but he defended his light heavyweight title, and potentially he could get the heavyweight title possibly. So um, we'll see how things go. I mean, again, he still has a lot of time. I think his prime is right now. I feel like he maybe hit his peak a little bit later on in his career because he started MMA so late. And I feel like the earlier you start MMA, the earlier peak is. The later you start MMA, the later your peak is, kind of thing. Like, for example, we'll use Rory McDonald as an example, right? He started fighting at 16. His peak was like 24 to 27 or so. But maybe for Alex, his peak is like 35 to 38 because he started MMA much later, right? Maybe in his 30s versus Rory McDonald, who's done it his whole life.
Yes, especially that Rory was in so many battles before, like fighting
Yeah.
against really tough opponents, like Carlos Condit in like
Yeah.
14 years ago. So yes, yes.
Yeah. He fought the Condit fight. I mean, I remember he was on the verge of winning that fight, possibly, or it was close. I mean, he just got put away in the final seconds. But yeah, no, like it's crazy because like, one or two hard fights could, you know, bring that peak down fast. So uh yeah, I think that's probably that's really it with him. He just, that second Robbie fight with Rory was a crazy battle. I remember like Rory like broke his nose really badly, and then Lawler just like jabbed it, and then he, his nose was gone essentially. Robbie's face was all busted up, and it's probably one of the best fights of all time in my opinion.
Yes, yes, I agree. Well, like at least top three, but probably probably the best ever.
Yeah,
Uh,
up there for sure. Like especially in Canadian fights, it's definitely up there.
And when you are a few hours to your fight and you have a like this like feeling that you will be fighting against a tough opponent that you can be hurt, you can have some problems. How do you deal with this like pressure or stress in your head?
Honestly, I don't really think about it too much. Honestly, it's like I've done this for a long time, that it's not really gonna affect me as much as maybe it would to someone else because I've done this for a long time. I've trained hard for it. I've put on a lot of time in preparation for this. As long as I just be myself, it's things are gonna go well. It's gonna be a good performance either way.
And after the fight, when you have a more free time, what do you like to do with your time when you are not all the time in the gym?
Yeah, it's really just catching up with because I make a lot of sacrifices for what I do. Really, it's just about catching up with those that maybe I haven't gotten to see as much, like friends, family, girlfriend, etc. Really, just catching up with everybody and making up for the time that I lost in the training camp because 2 months is a long time to prepare for this this fighting game that we do. Um, so really, it's in my opinion, it's just really just catching up on time and getting things back in order, preparing for the next what I want to work on after the fight, what I want to get better at, and really just taking things from there, and then just getting back into things slowly, and then again, just don't get injured for the training camps, and then on to the next one.
Yes, probably when you are in the training camp, you are like out of the like normal life because it's like
Yeah,
training and like making weight, like thinking about fighting.
yeah,
You probably like don't have let this like regular life.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely you're in a world of your own for sure. It's your own, like especially like the more the weight cut kicks in or the dieting down kicks in. You just have less energy to do things. So like you're either at home or in the gym and not much else.
Okay, Adam. So many thanks for the conversation.
Of
I hope
course.
that you will be fighting in the BFL in their next show, and maybe after this you will like get another bout, and you will end this year with 4-0 record.
Yeah, that's the plan. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, no, I'm happy to come back anytime. But yeah, hopefully we get on this September 6th show. Maybe by the time this is up, maybe there'll be a fight confirmed. So if you're watching this and you want to stay tuned, make sure you just keep up to date on Instagram, primetime_era, and you'll be able to keep up with all current fight news on there.